A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, we're going to be talking about celebrities and public figures becoming Christians with Stephen McAlpine, who's an award-winning Christian author, pastor and national consultant for churches and Christian schools. Stephen McAlpine, a special welcome back to 2020.
Thanks, Neil. Great to be with you today.
Hey, Steve, celebrities becoming Christians. Who are we talking about here? Name a few names so we know what sort of context we're talking.
Name and shame. Yeah, first thing, red flag. Whenever we say celebrities and Christians, some of us run a mile because we think, what does that even mean? I guess I'm looking at people who are intellectually well known, like A.N. Hersey Ali, and who is a friend of Richard Dawkins, actually, and was a well-known atheist, and someone such as Russell Brand, who the famous, I guess, the popular culture celebrity.
So, you've got a comedian in there, you've got an intellectual. These are the sorts of people, and you might be saying, well, here they are sticking their neck out. And at a time when you might even say for celebrities, and a lot of them do run the other way, keep your head down, don't talk about faith, don't talk about religion in the marketplace, but increasingly people like A.N. Hersey Ali and Russell Brand, well, they're not afraid at all. And I guess that comes down to something's happened in their own hearts, something's happened within that's given them a little bit of level of courage to be able to speak out.
Yeah, look, that's really interesting. It's certainly not a time to keep your head up if you are Christian, I think. You'll lose a lot of followers, I would have thought, if you're a celebrity at the moment. But at the same time, there's a tension in our culture that Russell Brand in particular over the last 3 or 4 years has leaned into spirituality. And it's very easy to use the God word, but he's become more and more focused and eventually got baptized in the River Thames about 4 or 5 months ago. And every TikTok or every Instagram video, he's talking about something from the scriptures. And something in him was none of those other things that he was pursuing seemed to satisfy. And it went from an intellectual curiosity to, I need something in myself as I look at the way the world is, but also as I look at how I am. And that's the same with A.N. Hersey Ali from a cultural perspective. There's a deep interest in cultural Christianity at the moment, that the Christian framework gave the West something that we're now losing. And even if they're not becoming Christian, a lot of other intellectuals particularly are going, there's something in the framework that we would not want to give up too easily. But people like A.N. Hersey Ali and Russell Brand have gone the whole hog, I think.
So even when you have someone like Richard Dawkins, a friend of A.N. Hersey Ali, and he himself drawn into perhaps the admission that he himself is a cultural Christian, and that doesn't necessarily mean Christian by sometimes the definition we like to apply, a biblical definition, but certainly there's a lot of people who are cultural Christians because they recognise there's something about our culture that has been buoyed by our Christian culture. Is this something you think that public intellectuals are obviously engaging with?
Well, the readers, and most of all the readers of history. So A.N. Hersey Ali, an atheist and a close ally, and Richard Dawkins was so upset because A.N. Hersey Ali had an article last year in The Atlantic which was called Why I Am Now a Christian, and that kind of like, what? And it blew categories out of the water. And she said that she'd moved to Christian frameworks because of the cultural stuff as she read history, but she stopped and looked and said it's something about her that needed to change. And so Richard Dawkins was so upset about this, they had a public debate that you could pay money. It was like, prize fighters intellectually trying to land one on the jaw. And at the end of the conversation, he said, and I quote this, "I came here today, A.N., to convince you that you're not a Christian. Now I see that you are a Christian, and Christianity is stupid. It makes no sense." And he was shocked that his former atheist ally had switched. And so he is cultural Christian. He likes the fruit of the gospel, but he doesn't like the root of the gospel. And she spoke in her talk about how she'd been humbled to realise that she had been proud. And that's a huge shift. And I think you're seeing that across historians like Tom Holland, who's inching his way towards Christian frameworks. You see it in people like Nick Cave, who sort of dabbles around the edges of it. And Justin Brierley, whose book, The Surprising Rebirth of the Belief in God, documents the fact that we haven't reached the new atheism heights. We've sort of moved away from that.
What do you think, Stephen, about a quest for truth in spirituality? This journey of discovery that people go on, and this week I'm a Buddhist, and next week I'm trying some Hindu practices, and I'm reading widely, and I'm eventually I'll get to that stuff about Jesus in the Bible. What about this quest for truth? Is this something that when you see that there are celebrities going on that pathway, does that actually have an effect, do you think, on their followers?
Yeah, yes and no. I think more likely that Christians have to be careful not to go, well, we've got another celebrity, so Jesus must be right. I think that's a poor way to look at it. And for Kanye West, for example, who sort of became a Christian in a flurry, a lot of the decisions he's made in the last 2 years are questionable, I think. And so we're not too attached to celebrity. But when we see people who are thinkers and influencers go, I am dabbling in the spirituality, but every time they come across the person of Jesus, they're intrigued. And I remember even watching something from the late, great Keith Green, who said that he explored 10 different religions, and they all said, we believe this and we like Jesus. And the next one said, we believe this and we like Jesus. And he eventually said, why don't I just look at what Jesus says? And it's the compelling nature of Jesus, I think, that people like Russell Brand, because Russell Brand in the end said, I'm not a celebrity when I wake up in the morning. In my head, I'm Russell. And I just realized that I was proud and addicted and selfish, and something about Jesus changed that. And you have to be very careful not to dismiss that and say, well, people like Russell Brand can't become Christian because he's too bad. Because various prostitutes, tax collectors and thieves on crosses somehow became Christian while the good people didn't. And I just think we've got to be very careful how we navigate this.
What I can hear you say is that there are dangers in attaching Christianity too quickly to some of these celebrities, because just because someone makes a public decision to name themselves as a Christian doesn't necessarily mean they've got all the theology right that you might have been looking at for years and years and years, and your whole life is shaped by the Word of God, and you're following Christ because He is the leader that we're called to follow and to identify with His identity. But just because someone comes to Christ and they're a celebrity doesn't mean they know it all, and so I guess you've got to be a little bit tolerant of them saying the right things or the wrong things.
As I would with everyone else, because I'd say you're not saved by your knowledge of everything like that. You're saved by faith. And we want to see fruit. It's the fruit of the gospel that you say over time that will show itself in fruit. And I think there's other people like one of the major musicians in the band Korn became a Christian quite a few years ago, and he stayed with it. And it's a complex world he lives in as a singer in a sort of a very successful band, but he navigates it because he has to live his world as well. And everyone else is getting up to go to work or whatever they're doing. And these people, that's their jobs. They have to be Christian in that setting. And I think we need to cut them some slack. But I noticed with Russell Brand in particular, he started to explore things that over the years brought him closer and closer into a defining understanding of Jesus. And I'd say that's the point. The same with A.N. Hersey Alley. I've seen the same with Tom Holland, the historian, and you see the same even with Jordan Peterson. He can't get away from the Jesus question. Jesus strides over history.
Take us back to the Kanye West example for a moment, because people were excited about Kanye West. Here he was, a cultural icon, and putting out albums that were giving glory to God, touring around and having basically church services and worship services. And you think, well, how deeply do you get into your faith? But there does seem to have been a little bit of a dogleg in there, and he's taken a different turn for the worse. I guess you can always have some hope that he'll come back to his appreciation of what he clearly must have understood to be able to produce the sort of music that he did. But of course, the followers, these are the ones who are the big losers here, because if you're following Kanye, then you're going to go which way Kanye goes. I guess you've got to actually keep your focus on the one that Kanye was singing about, and that is Jesus.
You see, Bob Dylan became a Christian for a while as well and then rejected it. And when Jesus himself says, this is who people say I am, this is who other people say I am, who do you say I am? And, Peter named him as the Messiah. And then in another situation where Jesus says everyone's leaving, and Peter says, well, who else would we go to? You alone have the words of eternal life. So I think when you leave Jesus after going to Jesus, you're going to circle around in aimlessness a little bit, and you're going to go to things that are not healthy, I think, because you've met the one who is the truth and who is the life and who is the way. However, I think when I see someone like Russell Brand and I watch him fairly closely to see where he's headed, one of the things that's interesting is that these converts to Christianity don't go in for Christianity light. They want the creeds, they want the historical documents, they want deep Christianity, they want the Bible. I think if we thought that the way a celebrity becomes a Christian is to make Christianity cool, they're not going for the cool versions of Christianity necessarily.
Okay, cool versions of Christianity and the hard yards Christianity, the getting into the nitty-gritty, understanding the historic foundations of truth and appreciating where they fit into a modern society. Hey, let me ask you, Stephen, about this thing that was really getting very hot in recent years called the new atheism. And the likes of Richard Dawkins and a whole bunch of people who were writing books and selling off bestsellers, and, this was going to be the thing that was going to snuff out that ridiculousness of Christianity. But give us your impressions here. What's happened to this new atheism, do you think?
Well, I guess it became very hot about 20 to 25 years ago with the God delusion, and then I remember the bus ad campaign in the UK where Richard Dawkins and Polly Toynbee, another atheist journalist, launched this campaign that said on the side of buses, there's probably no God, so stop worrying and get on and enjoy your life. And it sounds funny, and at least they were a little bit honest. They didn't say there's no God. They at least had a little bit of agnosticism about that. But in the last 20 years, have people just stopped worrying and got on with and enjoying their lives? This is the most anxious age we've ever been in. And the meaning and purpose bucket in our culture is very empty. People are looking for meaning and purpose because you can have the experience bucket as full as you like. And this is something Mark Sayers from Melbourne points out. But if the meaning and purpose bucket is low, none of those experiences match up. So when a celebrity such as Russell Brand can have anything he wants, and it's still not enough, that raises questions. Because if you've got nothing and you say, I want more, that will satisfy, you're still on a journey to realize that it doesn't. But when you've got everything and you're still addicted and you still can't sort yourself out, that's when questions get raised. And people in the West have got a lot of stuff, but they're very anxious because they don't have a meaning and purpose framework to hold it within. And new atheism could never provide that.
We're often interpreting a whole lot more, and maybe it's just subconsciously, than just the words that people will say. What's so good about these celebrities, and a lot of them, coming out as Christians? We've been talking about some of the bad things. What about the good things and what it says to us, what it's communicating to us, whether we're understanding words being said or we're seeing some, image of Russell Brand getting baptized by Bear Grylls. We're seeing those sorts of things, but what's the big message? What's good about these Christians naming the name of Christ, even though they might not necessarily have a whole great lot of maturity about them?
Well, a couple of things. The Bible verse that was read before this segment started was that not many of you were noble or wise, but some were. And we do need leaders in our context who have a sharp mind and wisdom, and there are many Christian leaders who do, but people like Ayan Hirsi Ali is a formidable intellect. And when she writes something that non-Christians are reading, not just, in the confines of our Christian bookstores, but in major journals, there are other people that are going to stop and think, well, I can't dismiss her as someone who hasn't thought about anything and is just sucking this Christianity stuff like the Kool-Aid. And when someone like Russell Brand, whose lifestyle was so outrageous and transgressive, reins that in and says that was sin, other people might think that too. And because there's no benefit in the wider culture, which is opposed to Christianity, the wider elite culture, for those people becoming Christian. And one thing I noticed about Russell Brand was that he's a very good exegete of a text. And he's been able to bring that to the Bible. And I thought, well, that was an interest. I had not thought about that passage. And if you're coming new to the Bible and you're a smart person who God has gifted intellectually anyway, you're going to be able to say, I'm coming with fresh eyes to a text that some of us have fogged over. And I think that's helpful for Christians as well as non-Christians.
I always appreciate too when people are able to articulate these things in a clear way. You've got, as you say, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who's been writing articles and they've been published in major journals. Take us back to where most people sit though, because most people are believing or reading what celebrity gossip columns might be saying about the celebrities. So there's a bit of a disconnect here because there's those things that might be intellectually sound and full of truth and very, very persuasive, but then there's the celebrity gossip columns that this is where the majority of people are at, unfortunately.
Yeah, look, I was in Wahlburgers having a burger the other day, which felt like a shift because I'd just been to the Australian Chamber Orchestra at the Sydney Opera House, and then we walk into Wahlburgers. But Mark Wahlberg is a conservative Catholic, and he makes that point very clear that we believe this stuff as a family because it shapes us. And then you read things, like Jim Carrey, who says, I'd love everyone to be rich for a while to realise that doesn't sort things out. I think some of the celebrities are asking the deep questions. And people like Nick Cave, who's well known around the world, has a column on his blog, Red Hand Files, in which he deals with the question of suffering. So whether you're a celebrity or not, or whether you're an elite or a popular culture celebrity, you can't avoid suffering. Suffering is common to the human condition. And even the non-intellectual person has lined up to hear Jordan Peterson talk about suffering. And Jordan Peterson has his own strange relationship with where he is with Christianity. But whether you're elite or popular culture, suffering makes you sit up and listen. And I think there are people in all those categories that are exploring religious faith again from the context of suffering.
Well, we've run out of time, but let me just name a few of the names of people who claim to be Christians, celebrities, big names, names we'll all know. We've mentioned the likes of a Russell Brand and an Ayaan Hirsi Ali, but here's a few names here, and I'll get your general impression here because, this might be your brand of Christianity, it might not be your brand, but here's a few names. The names like Tom Hanks, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, Justin Bieber, who's been well known to a younger generation for his relationship with Jesus. You mentioned Mark Wahlberg and, Wahlburgers, Denzel Washington, Dennis Quaid, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Nick Jonas, who's, across a number of generations been quite a significant pop star. Movie stars like Matthew McConaughey. We mentioned Kanye West, other names in there, Jane Fonda, Selena Gomez, Chuck Norris, Mr. T, going back a few years now, Jennifer Garner, Ben Affleck even claims to be a Christian, MC Hammer and Stephen Baldwin. So there's a lot of names there, and I guess they've got their own brand of Christianity, but obviously we're pointing people to having a biblical brand of Christianity. If you're going to be sort of searching for some role models here, how do you point people back to a biblical brand of Christianity, Stephen?
Well, I think what you want to say is check the fruit of the person who's making the claim, but also be very careful because Jesus said, no one will speak ill of me who's not with me. And I just say be very careful. And, I obviously think Justin Bieber, he's a Christian. He married someone who's a Christian from the Baldwin family, actually. And just be very careful because those people have to live their lives in their heads as they are, not as a celebrity. And I think that's part of the issue, that we have to realise that we make them celebrities, but in front of Jesus, they're just the same size as us. That makes us not despise them, but it also makes us not hero worship them beyond what Jesus would do. And they're the same size as us as they stand before Jesus.
And Stephen, are you writing any articles about these things? I know that there'll be a lot of people who are interested in celebrities and faith. Is there something that you're working on, or is there one you've published recently?
Yeah, I wrote something about the Russell Brand one a few months back, and I've written about Anne Hersey Alley. So if you Googled both of those in my name, they won't have heard of me, but I've heard of them. So I think I've got a few articles on my StephenMcAlpine.com website.
Okay, Stephen McAlpine, award-winning Christian author, pastor and national consultant for churches and Christian schools. You can connect with Stephen and look for some of those articles at StephenMcAlpine.com. That's StephenMcAlpine.com. Stephen, always great chatting. Thanks so much for another great insight today on 2020.
It was great to be with you, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.